Chapter 51. The shadowy Kuiper Belt had been their home for human centuries. For them, however, it might as well have been measured in human nanoseconds. Their interstellar travel had taken them far from their origin space, far from the star they'd once orbited. The occasional stream of photons broke their long hibernation, but only momentarily. The creatures would awake from their slumber long enough to consume gas molecules and drink in energy from the distant sun. Human centuries passed between these brief periods, and the lifeforms enjoyed their brief wakings before passing back into slumber. They had waited for the universe to change, for there to be light, light to feed, light to sustain, light to breed. The sudden burst of photons in the belt awoke them, energized them, and they drank in every particle. When it released yet another pulse, they did more than wake up. They began to travel. Thousands and thousands of them clumped together in a roughly spherical shape, their bodies purging themselves of millennia-old gas reserves their core provided. Once the pod began to accelerate, there was no way to slow it down. But with the continued pulses, there would be no reason. Once they reached the source, they would be free. They would be free to find a new home.
Gunny.
Talby's voice crackled over the comms. Aye, sir.
What do you think?
Gunny stopped himself before cursing, but only just. I believe, he said, we have a bit of a pest problem. The lieutenant laughed, although Gunny thought it sounded a bit forced.
Black has an idea about that,
he said.
We fire another CO2 round to get the bastards interested in leaving the area for a few minutes.
A few minutes, Gunny echoed. Sir, at best speed, it will take us at least 2 minutes to get to the beacon. And that's if we manage to skate all the debris. We're going to need a little more time to make it back out with the beacon.
Agreed,
Talby said.
Which is why we're going to clear it out.
Gunny raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? He could practically hear Talby trying to choose his words, not to mention find the right tone of voice.
The trio loaded us up with more than tritium flechettes and CO2 bombs. I have 2 hyperneutrino warheads loaded and ready to launch.
Gunny frowned. You're going to fire the warheads inside?
Affirmative,
Talby said.
Bottom line, it should clear out the aft section. Then we'll use the CO2 missiles to handle the rest.
Aye, sir. Gunny waited for the lieutenant to continue, but he didn't. I feel like there's a but coming.
But,
Talby said,
we don't know exactly what it's going to do, apart from destroying anything biological.
If he hadn't been wearing a helmet and magnetically tethered to a skiff floating out in space, Gunny would have rubbed his eyes. Sir, are we sure those things even count as biological? Talby paused before replying, the seconds stretching into an infuriatingly long eternity.
Gunny, I don't know. The trio certainly thinks they are.
Great, Gunny thought. We're trusting our lives on their conclusions. Or hell, maybe just their suspicions. Understood, sir.
The only real problem,
Talby said,
is we don't think your suits will keep you from getting shredded into nothing. Therefore, I suggest you move back another click from Mira.
Acknowledged, sir, Gunny said.
I'll give you a heads up before we fire.
Aye, sir, Gunny said. Heads up. He glanced at the cam feed. The creatures seemed to have ended their feeding frenzy on the CO2 released by the missile. The swarms were gathering again, order reestablishing itself after the chaos. He activated the squad comms. Marines, we're going to get a little more distance between us and that derelict piece of shit. Went, keep your head on a swivel. I don't want any surprises while we're moving.
Copy, Gunny.
Murdoch, you're the other lookout. Keep cycling through the cam feeds. You both let me know if you see anything hostile approaching.
Aye, Gunny,
Murdoch said. The kid sounded afraid, but less out of sorts than he had on their last trip out. That was an improvement. Not much, but a start. Here we go, he said, and activated the 4 thrusters. The skiff moved backwards, slowly accelerating. Gunny kept his eyes on the 4 cam feed, watching with some relief as he put more distance between the skiff and Mira's infested aft section. Now, he thought, if only we didn't have to go back in there, this would be perfect. Shadows moved across the pulsing lights inside the wrecked hull. Gunny shivered. What was that large one? A new life form? Or just another starfish? He watched as the distance meter rolled higher and higher. The skiff's laser sensor repeatedly fired pulses at Mira and measured the response from the hull. 300 meters, 400. The SV-52 came into view, the craft hanging above them like a shadowy, misshapen bird. Talby had come to a complete stop, waiting for Gunny to clear the area. He wondered just how close the SV-52 would have to get to Mira before firing the missile. More importantly, he hoped the radiation shielding on the 52 kept the LT and Copenhagen safe. Shit, he hoped 1 kilometer was far enough away for his squad to survive. When they reached an 800-meter distance from Mira, he started to decelerate with nudges of the aft thrusters. By the time they reached 1 kilometer, the SV-52 had nearly come to a halt itself.
Gunny?
Murdoch said, his voice trembling. What is it, Private?
Sir, there's something behind us, and it's coming fast.
Gunny switched to the rear cam feed. He saw nothing but the glint of distant stars. What are you talking about?
Shit,
Wentz said.
Switch to the cannon feed, Gunny.
Frowning, Gunny flipped feeds. He took a deep breath and held it. Out in the emptiness behind them and above them, something a little less dark than space itself was moving toward them. Random pinpricks of light flashed off its surface. How far? Gunny asked in a dead voice.
Collision course, 2 minutes.
Chapter 53. Gunny was out of the way, at least Talby hoped. The skiff had backed up a kilometer away from Mira. Black suggested the distance might be safe. Might. Talby didn't like mights, or supposedly, or even, I think, when it came to the safety of his Marines. And he sure as hell didn't like them when they had to do with his own safety. Basically, because Black didn't say, I'm sure, or I know, he knew this could turn into one big shit show. But did they have a choice? Yeah, that was the problem. The trio insisted they needed to capture the beacon. So did Black and the captain. Talby understood all of that. If the device was attracting the creatures, they needed a way to keep it secure, and hopefully keep the damn things from going deeper into Sol system. So, yes, they needed the beacon. Talby growled low in his throat. On the SV-52's forward cam feed, the aft section's dark interior seemed to dance with even darker shadows. The ram had left extensive damage in its wake, the infrastructure now little more than twisted shapes of Atmos steel and swirls of fractured and disintegrated plasteel. But that didn't mean the aft was clear. Not one bit. The pulsing lights had increased in brightness, as though they'd awakened the creatures. Pissed them off, more like, he said aloud. And that's just what they needed. Gunny flying into the proverbial kicked hornet's nest the pre-Sol era books like to talk about. Talby had never seen a hornet. He'd seen bees before in the Dallas agricultural domes, but never a hornet. But he knew how much a sting supposedly hurt. Mira had turned from being a haunted hulk of crumbling Atmos steel into the largest damned hornet nest that ever existed. And the hornets? They did more than sting. The command crew comms came to life.
Sir,
Gunny said.
We have a bogey coming at us, a big one.
Frowning, Talby flipped to the rear cams. He didn't see anything, but the gasp Copenhagen loosed told him all he needed to know. He switched to the cannon cam, and there it was. A large, irregularly shaped shadow traveling at high speed and right into their path. I see it, Gunny,
Black,
Dunn said.
Suggestions?
The AI responded immediately.
We have 5 more CO2 projectiles. I suggest we fire one to distract the incoming object.
You mean, Talby said, it's an exosolar life form.
Yes, Lieutenant.
Black said.
Only not a single life form.
Talby shuddered. A swarm? A herd? A cluster? What was the right name, anyway?
Talby.
Dunn asked. The sound of the captain's voice shook off the random thoughts. Aye, sir?
We'll give you cover.
The captain said.
Go ahead with the plan.
Aye, sir, Talby said. Gunny, you ready?
Aye, sir.
Gunny said.
I've got the throttle ready in case we need to get moving in a hurry.
Just make sure you don't head toward it, Talby said.
Aye, sir.
Gunny said after a brief pause. Talby grinned. He knew the sergeant had just managed to keep himself from saying no shit. Here we go, Talby said. Copenhagen?
On your mark, sir.
Talby tightened his hands on the controls while all the possibilities flipped through his mind. There could be a shockwave. They could be knocked from their position, thrown in any direction, maybe even into the path of the oncoming object, or creatures. And wouldn't that be the perfect ending to this mess? He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Mark. The SV-52 shuddered as the magnetic launcher repelled the missile through the tube and into space. Once it reached a distance of 10 meters, the rocket engine kicked in. The missile streaked through the twilight, its aft burning yellow and orange as it ate the emptiness between the SV-52 and Mira in less than 3 seconds. And then, the universe became a very interesting place.